Hey, and welcome to State of the Hack. I'm Nick Carr.
And I'm Christopher Glyer.
And we're here by the one and only Dave Kennedy.
Hey there, everybody. How's it going?
So thanks for joining, and thanks for hosting DerbyCon and getting all these awesome people together. It's fantastic. So
absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, it's my first one. It's been really impressive. Kind of see, like, I love the talks have been great, but then also like all the people. I love the networking opportunities, and it's been really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what we wanted to accomplish, is a place you can come to and get to hang out with your friends and people you've never met before, and just more of an open community. And that's I think it's really what DerbyCon is about.
Awesome.
Was. However, we're going to get that later, though.
yeah, absolutely. Before we get into some of the looking back at DerbyCon, we wanted to talk a little about what you're seeing, like with your work. You see both sides. You see some of the detection stuff and some of the. Obviously, you guys are known for a lot of your offensive work.
Yep.
Just like curious, what's working for you? What tactics are you guys using? What are you observing shift?
Yeah, I think if you look at the state of the industry right now, there's a lot of emphasis on detection, and I think that's an important piece. Companies focusing on getting information and being able to comb through that information to identify unusual activity. Over the past few years, it was still traditionally executables and binaries. This is still main deployment methods. And then you saw a shift around PowerShell, which a number of years ago saw a shift around PowerShell. And that's really changed. PowerShell is becoming less and less used out there. The simple fact that with script block logging, with the amount of logging and things that even basic EDR products will do now, is looking for those types of attacks. The shift has really been focusing very heavily off of things like living off the land binaries and scripts, being able to get remote code execution through legitimate applications on the system.
Nick loves his daily scriptlets.
Oh yeah, scriptlets are amazing.
Yeah,
and that's been a huge attack surface. But I think when you look at more tradecraft, I think when you can exhibit usual behavior on an application or on a usual behavior on a system, that's where detection starts to get really difficult. And when we start to do a lot of our emulation, our simulations on the red team, we really try to stay in that. We stay within parent-child process relationships so we can keep that Markov chain appropriate. We leverage legitimate behavior around lateral movement and being able to communicate on legitimate ports and protocols.
Yeah.
And it's really trying to take less of the hacking techniques out and things that are pretty easy to spot, and manipulate it in a way where it becomes very difficult for detection. I think when you look at a lot of the tailored attacks that we see out there, that's really where it starts to get tricky. And security operations centers really struggle with that, whether it's an internal SOC or leveraging folks like yourselves or whomever. It becomes difficult to identify those because you're making things look legitimate as an employee would use. You're baselining their environments. You're not dropping into a command shell and running specific commands. You're really looking at what's on there and understanding what you're doing and moving in a way that is much more harder to do. So
how do you teach bad guys to look good? Like, are people doing a lot of testing in labs to see what good behavior looks like? Or
what's great about the data that we have is it can be used both on offense and defense. So one thing that we do is we have a huge Elasticsearch instance where we can go through a lot of data and see things that are successful for us, baseline user behaviors and environments. And more like you folks on the IR side, we do the same thing on the red teaming side. We'll baseline a customer's environment and look at what they do. And the same things can be applied. We can use machine learning on the offense too to identify specific patterns and behavior. And what's interesting is that there's never been a time for us on the red team side where we had to be careful. It was really where we could be overtly loud. We can run MS-0867, or we can run all these different exploits in an environment and literally be unfiltered. But what's really cool to see is that the industry has really been focusing very heavily and understanding that protection is something that takes a long time to implement. So why not augment that with ways to get visibility into our environments? And I think that's been really, really successful for a lot of company strategies. So.
Yeah, I did pen testing at a previous job from 2004 to 2009, and I never once got caught. Literally never once. Like the state of detection industry, I think has changed pretty significantly, even just in the last 4 to 5 years, I'd say. A lot of endpoint products and tools now are actually pretty effective at finding some of the activity, or some years before it'd be the only way you might be able to find is on the network.
No, I love leveraging that detection data, or the things that you hate to remove from your logic because you're filtering out something noisy or legitimate to inform the red side is really cool.
And that's a big issue with security operations centers, is that noise threshold, because if you're doing monitoring and detection right, you have a certain threshold of things that you look for, right? And there's certain things that you try to identify, but there are also things that are substantially false positives, right? And you can't weed those out. You have to look at those behaviors to see. And there was a good example. We had a customer of ours that we were doing a threat hunting exercise for. And we saw it was an Exchange server baking out to China at 2 o'clock in the morning with an invoke expression and loading code directly into memory. And I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, that's, clear sign that you're compromised and everything else. And we started looking into it, and they had hired a third-party contracting company to develop Exchange metrics for them, and it was legitimate, right? And it was a non-code sign binary that at 2 o'clock in the morning would go and download every time at 2 o'clock on their Exchange servers running a system.
Yep.
It's like, and that's of course a domain controller as well. And so, you're like, wow, But those types of behaviors are things that are unusual, right?
Yeah.
And I think the balance is with security operations centers is what's too much noise, and how do you get enough things towards people and educate them to be able to look for things like living off the land binaries and scripts, to look for unusual behavior with PowerShell. One of the things that we had a SOC analyst that missed something. Luckily, we caught the post-execution piece. But with Amazon Web Services, you have a primary launcher, but you also can do HTA backups as a launcher. So Amazon actually has a HTA backup launcher. And so one of our SOC analysts, we saw the exact name was like an Amazon, console, AWS console extension type, and inside of it was all the Amazon code, and then they tucked the malicious code directly in the backside of it, right? And so one of our SOC analysts was like, oh, that's fine, it's Amazon. I Googled it, it looks fine, everything's good. And all of a sudden, goes through, and all of a sudden you see PowerShell exploitation, callbacks and everything else. And luckily, you catch that immediately as soon as it happens. But it's those types of things that if you can baseline and build your environment in a way that emulates legitimate traffic, it starts to become really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing how, at least on the IR side, seeing funny things like your PowerShell one, where you can come up with something that is like a bulletproof detection.
Yeah.
And then there's always going to be exceptions to that.
Like when people administer their network with Empire.
We had a.
That was a contractor situation.
That was
it was
amazing.
like that's Empire. They're like, no, it's a custom tool that a company built for us. We're like,
That's
that
PowerShell
tool is
Empire.
Empire.
But then also seeing kind of how attackers are kind of like continuously changing their tactics. Like even just this week, I was looking at a spear phishing attack or a phishing email, and I learned 2 new things this week. So if you send a spear phishing email with like a .img file, inside of it, the Windows Explorer treats it like a zip file. So you can just double click on it, and then inside of that can be whatever you want. And then the other one was
free bypass.
The other cool one was a kind of a unique persistence. We've seen going back to 2014 link files in the startup folder. Well, this particular group used a .url file in the startup folder, and then the .url file invoked the Windows script handler to run a VBS.
Yeah.
So the URL launched a VBS. The VBS then launched their executable. I don't know why you would have this kind of, but that's what they did. But 2 new things I learned this week where I was
that's awesome.
I always love people adapting the technique. Like the techniques are, you can sort of borrow some code for what's actually going under the hood, but like how flexible people are getting with how you package it up. Different file extensions. That's why I love scriptlets again and stuff like that. It's just like tackling this thing, looking for it anywhere, and seeing crazy stuff. Both of those were pretty evasive, interesting things, but used for spam campaigns.
Right. It was like Remcos or something.
Oh man, this is a waste.
One of my favorite one was a couple years back was Kafter. Kafter would use MSHTA and then use registry embeds in multiple locations to reassemble so it was fileless persistence, and that was an amazing one at the time. This is 2 years ago, and it would allow you to do remote code execution without ever dropping a file into the system. You're just modifying the registry.
Yes.
And that's just, that's cool. It's obviously horrible, but it's cool. But look at what it was intended for. It was clickjacking. It literally wasn't.
It's so annoying. Fin8 stole the technique, and it was so annoying because you want to just filter all that out. I don't care about the Kafter stuff. There's Fin8 was in there.
I think was it Script Kings or what's the it's like I think it's like a Bitcoin miner. It's implemented a bootkit now. It's got like multiple. It has like 11 different like crazy things they do, and it's like a Bitcoin miner. It's something like really like
anytime a new web application CVE drops, people are out there scanning for it and doing mining. It's like it's the worst. But nice, man. No, that's great. Is there any particular language that you guys are using right now, or?
So we've actually gone more to C, which for us has been really successful. .NET is still really great. C# is great, but there's a lot more visibility coming to that as well with CLR and everything. So I think we'll start to see a lot more visibility and that dying off as a post-exploitation method, very similar to how PowerShell was. But that'll take a while. It's not as mobile, I think, as PowerShell was able to do. I was actually talking to Lee Holmes. So if you look at kind of the father of PowerShell was Jeff Snover, and the security person that built the security into PowerShell was really Lee Holmes. And it was funny because Lee gave a talk here at DerbyCon, and he showed an original emails that I sent to Microsoft when I did the very first ever PowerShell security talk, PowerShell OMFG at, I think it was like DEF CON 12 or 13. And it's funny because when Lee told me, he's like, "Hey, is it cool if you publish the emails there?" I'm like, "Hey, was I an a-hole? You know, like was I a jerk? You know, could I see it first? You know?"
Yeah.
And that was really nice, by the way. I was really nice. You know, I was like, "Hey, everybody," you know, but
Show that lots. Yes,
yeah, please do. But you know, what was interesting about then versus now is that, you know, they were trying to change the world around PowerShell, which was a very powerful programming language with security implications for the positive and the negative. And you know, Lee was talking about how it started being used for ransomware and crypto mining and being able to like lock people's up. And he had saw a forum where somebody had lost 23 years of their photos and everything else, leveraging PowerShell exploitation, and like broke his heart to see those. And you know, they've spent a substantial amount of time getting visibility with AMSI and everything else. And don't get me wrong, has its flaws and things of circumvention on those. Most specifically, running as a user, that which you can just pass to memory space. But you know, but regardless, you know, PowerShell has definitely become one of those ones where, you know, it's a really easy way to detect if you want to, pretty natively within Windows. And I think you'll start to see that with C# as well, which is going back to native. If you look at a lot of the shadow broker leaks that happen, I mean, they're still doing hardcore C development, right? Mm-hmm. All their Linux exploits, all their Windows exploits. It's not leveraging techniques like Russia or China, even though they have groups that leverage that capability, but they're really much focused on that tradecraft. And I think what you'll see is that bounce back to really like the 90s way of hacking and doing more crafted, targeted exploit type attacks than more of the commoditized low-hanging fruit. It's just been so easy for us for the past 20 years to hack into everybody with everything that's out there. Now that attack surface is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, we're going to have to start to customize and keep tooling that way to be successful.
Now, do you guys see like either use or see use of like things like Python or like PyDXE or PyInstaller or those kinds of things? Yeah,
we see that all the time. In fact, just recently I decided to upload one of my old Python shells. It was just a reverse shell. So it was a callback, and I think it did it over HCP, and it was over AES. So it was AES encrypted communications, and you can change the key or whatever, but I didn't change it. So I basically, it was from 2011, so what, 8 years ago? Do the math right, 8 years ago. And so I downloaded it, and it was still the same hash, same exe as I did in 2011. Had been downloaded over 2 million times, and I uploaded it to VirusTotal, and 3 out of the whatever, 76 or so viruses that are up there didn't detect it as malicious. And I thought that was interesting because it's a non-code send binary. It's been up there for ages and eons, so anything old can also work as well. But PyDXE is still a very successful way for post-exploitation to get code execution.
And one of the reasons for that is, when you use a tool like PyDXE or PyInstaller, there's basically like a wrapper, like a little mini like runtime environment that it's going to execute, and that runtime environment is identical every single time. The only thing that's different is the little Python scripts that you're running. So for most antivirus and similar applications, they're just seeing like if you do like ML isn't going to work because every one of those, whether it's malicious or legitimate, is going to look the same. So that's not really a good technique. You almost, the only way to really, from a defensive perspective, detect it is like actually take it, understand that it's, this was used with PyDXE or PyInstaller or some other tool, extract it, and then look at the bytes of the script itself, and then come to some conclusions. I think that's part of the reason why, for that specific technique, why that's going to continue to work for a long time, because
it's sort of high threat density too, like the number of massive attacks that have used it. And I have something out looking for every PyDXE and PyInstaller binary that goes. It's like about across our visibility, the number of objects we look at, it's like 100 to 200 of each type a day, which is not a lot.
It's actually fairly rare in an enterprise to see a PyDXE. So like from a threat hunting perspective, if you can find ways, and there's a bunch of different ways you can find them, like their imports and really large files and a bunch of other things. If you can find them or look for them at scale, finding ones that are bad then from more of a threat hunting perspective is actually fairly straightforward, just because the ratio, it's not really common.
Yeah, we talked about some ways to hunt in for that at the No Easy Breach talk, which actually brings me to that was the first talk that I've given, and I gave it here, so it was like cool cool to kind of get my start doing at DerbyCon. And so if you want to check that talk out for more pyinstaller stuff. Yeah, no easy breach.
Yeah, it was what,
but
2015 was it?
Yeah. And so I just wanted to. It's sort of sad, obviously, to see things go this way. But man, I just wanted to thank you for providing the venue for so many good talks, so much good content, and like all the people that are here. It's been fantastic. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts, but want to share with anyone quickly kind of where we're at and maybe what conferences that you'll be at in the future that you'd recommend.
Sure. I think when we first started DerbyCon 1, and somebody asked me, what was your first DerbyCon as a joke, and actually my first DerbyCon was DerbyCon 0.1. We had an alpha version of DerbyCon here in Louisville where we did a free Metasploit class, and that actually spawned the idea of what DerbyCon was going to be, and it was a free Metasploit class where you can come to and learn the offensive techniques of everything, and it was brand new people to the industry that had never opened up Linux before, and we sat there for an entire day and trained them. And DerbyCon, when we started, it was really to be an environment where you can come to, and there's no rock stars, there's no egos, there's no barriers. Whether you're new to InfoSec or you're well established, you can be at a place where everybody feels like home and have that family feel. And so, as the years passed, it just continued to grow and grow and grow in popularity. And, we sold out in 12 seconds this year, which 3,000 tickets in 12 seconds is insane.
Yeah.
It was a crazy, and thank God I moved off of my homegrown Python script, by the way. So it was for the most of the years for up to, I think, DerbyCon 7 is when I decided to switch to Eventbrite.
It was a very smooth, stable 12 seconds. Yeah.
The one year I accidentally opened up tickets 5 minutes early as a joke, and they sold out before the actual time came. So the whole internet burned down. Everybody was so upset. So I showed up right at the same time. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. But you learn from those things. But at the end of the day, what DerbyCon was about isn't going away. Regardless of race, gender, religion, regardless of who you are and your status in the industry, regardless of what you've done before, everybody's experience matters. And that didn't stop. DerbyCon spawned a whole lot of new conferences. If you talk to any of these conference organizers, DerbyCon was either the pinnacle staple of how they started their conference, or a huge driving force behind it. And so I'm a huge fan of Wild West Hacking Fest with John Strand's thing out of South Dakota, Deadwood, South Dakota. Amazing conference there. GerCon's amazing out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. They do a great job there as well. AnyCon, Texas Cyber Summit, as well as NOLACon. I'm a really huge fan of New Orleans NOLACon. They do a really good job there. But more of those family feel ones. And there's already talks right now with all of the other Midwestern type conferences or Southern conferences to start more of a network between those smaller conferences so that they'll recognize other people's black badges and ways to help establish more of that community feel and keep it going. And I think that'll be a really, really awesome thing. And one thing I will mention, and this is going to be done after closing ceremonies, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that is not public yet, but it will be in the next day, is that at the end of closing ceremonies, we're going to announce what we call DerbyCon Communities, which is a way for you to start your own DerbyCon chapters in your local environments, and we'll help you with that. We'll talk about the structure of how those work. But a way to get more down to the grassroots of charity, the grassroots of community. One of my biggest memories of DerbyCon 1, and when I knew we had something special, is when we raised more money for charity than any other conference out there, including DEF CON. And that happened year after year after year. And that ability to make an impact locally here in Louisville, globally around the world, is an amazing thing. The Innocent Lives Foundation with Chris and Nagy and Social Engineer spawned out of this. All of those things was a big impact on the community, and we want to keep that going. So while DerbyCon's going, the DerbyCon Communities will still be alive and well, and our mission to kind of make sure that we're doing things well and helping the community. No barriers, no egos, no groups. It's just come in and learn and be awesome. So.
That's
awesome. Fantastic.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Great way to get
thank
everything.
you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Cheers.